Aaron said, my name is Laura. I'm the student ministries pastor here, and it is such a joy to be with you this morning. And I just want to take a minute to tell you what a privilege it has been to be a part of and to lead the student ministry here at ALC. Can I just tell you, God is up to something big in the life of our students, and it has been amazing to see students just coming back to church, getting plugged into community. We've celebrated baptisms this year. We've celebrated students taking steps in their faith, and it's been so cool to see them just growing and finding their identity in Jesus. That is the entire goal of everything we do in student ministries. I want to share one of my favorite stories with you. Over the summer, we did a camp experience here at ALC, and we gave out these challenge cards to students. And so one of our students got a card that encouraged her to start a Bible study. And so this was a little bit out of her comfort zone, but she decided that she was going to do it. So every week she opens up her home, and students from the church, students from her school who maybe don't feel comfortable walking into a church setting just yet, they come together every week, and she just shares about Jesus. She shares about how much he loves them, and she has grown so much, not in her own faith journey, but it has been so cool to watch her grow as a leader as well. So I say all that just to say thank you. Thank you for being a church that believes in the next generation, that invests in the next generation, because what's amazing is they are not the church of tomorrow. They are being the church right now, and they are leading the way for us. So thank you for investing in them and for believing in them. Well, today we are going to continue on in a series called The Way of Jesus. And over the past few weeks, we've been exploring this idea of how did Jesus live his life, and then how does he encourage us to live the same way he did? And as we jump into our message today, I want you to consider this. Have you ever had a time where you wanted to be helpful, but you realized it was going to cost you more than you originally thought? Now, I don't know if you've ever been in one of those stupid pay it forward trains in a drive-through. Notice I do say stupid. It's only happened to me once. I was at Starbucks, and I pull up to the drive-through, and the kind barista informs me, oh, the person in front of you paid for your drink. Amazing. Did I want to pay $6 for an overpriced cup of coffee that morning? Absolutely not, but I was there anyway. And I was thrilled that someone else would pay for my coffee. But then came the inevitable next question. Well, do you want to pay for the person behind you? Did a quick check in my rearview mirror, car full of people, like minimum 4 drinks. And I had this moment where I'm like, okay, am I going to be this selfish person who ends this train this morning, right? Or am I going to go ahead and say, yes, I'm going back and forth. I'm terrified that the barista can see this internal conflict in me, afraid of holding up the line. So I'm like, sure, I would love to pay for the person behind me. Well, $25 later, I drive off with my 1 cup of coffee. And don't get me wrong, I was thrilled to help out, right? I was thrilled to be a part of the chain. But there was this little nagging voice in the back of my head, the person in front of me got off so easy, right? They just paid for my coffee. I paid for 5 people behind me. And as I look back on that story, I realized that I was more than willing to help until I saw the cost. So this morning, I want us to be really honest with ourselves. Remember, no perfect people allowed, me included. Are we willing to step out of ourselves and serve someone when we have to sacrifice something? Sometimes it's really easy to come alongside someone and serve them as we're going, but most of the time, when we serve, it requires a sacrifice. So are we willing to step into that, to give up something in order to serve someone else? Well, this morning, we are going to break down a passage from my favorite book in the Bible. The students in the room know we're turning to the book of John. So we'll be in John chapter 13. If you have a Bible or a Bible app on your phone, go ahead and grab that so we can read through the passage together. But this morning, there's 2 lessons that I want us to take away from the story that we're going to look at. The first is, what does this passage teach us about the heart of God? And then the second is, what does Jesus want us to do about it in response to what we learn? Now, this story that we're going to look at, it takes place the night before Jesus goes to the cross. And I want to really paint a picture for you of what the scene would have looked like, because the symbolism of what Jesus is going to do is super important. So if you, in this time period, were coming into a meal like this, you would be seated on the floor around a table that's about the height of a coffee table that might be in your living room. Now, keep in mind, there's no running water in this time period, right? So washing up for dinner looks a little bit different. And one of the things that would normally happen at a meal like this is a servant would come around and wash the feet of all of the guests at the dinner. Now, I want you to imagine all of the places your feet go during the day, okay? Then you add in the fact that it was all dirt roads, there was mud, there was animals walking around, if you catch my drift. There were a lot of things that would make these people's feet nasty, right? They are likely wearing sandals that are open or they're going barefoot, so their feet are completely exposed to the elements. And the servants whose job it is to wash these dinner guests' feet, this job is considered the lowest of the low. Imagine your least favorite chore, like the thing that you put off, you don't want to do, you don't even want to force it onto someone else, right? I'll be honest, for me, anything that smells bad, I cannot deal with it, and I don't want to make someone else deal with it either. Whatever that is for you, whatever that chore is that you cannot stand to do, that is what this servant would be doing. But what we're going to see in this passage is we are going to see Jesus step into this job and use it as an opportunity to teach the disciples and us about the heart of God. So we're going to start in John 13, verse 3. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him. Now, I love how John writes, because he just paints this picture, right? You can imagine in your mind everything, all of the parts of the process as Jesus stands up and starts washing the disciples' feet. But something that makes this moment even more amazing is that we have to remember when Jesus was on earth, he was 100% God and 100% man. Now, this is something that's hard for us to wrap our minds around, but I want us to really look at how beautiful this fact is in this interaction. The knowledge that Jesus was 100% God is what prompted him to get up and serve his disciples. Verse 3 says that Jesus was aware of all of the authority of God that he had. And then it says, so he got up from the table and he walked to serve. This shows us the heart of God, and the heart of God is a servant. But because Jesus was also 100% man in this moment, he had the perspective to be able to see how he could serve his disciples. He likely had had his feet washed at meals all throughout his time on earth. And so because he had lived this full human experience, he knew that this is a way that the disciples could understand his point and not only receive it, but they could replicate it. It was something that would make sense to them. Now, I want us to notice that the disciples don't make the first move here, okay? They were all seated around the table. They probably realized that there was a step in the process that had been missed. They maybe even smelled the person next to them. But you don't see them getting up and saying like, okay, like, I'll take it this time. All we see is Jesus getting up to do it. And I think that this speaks even more to the fact of how radical this act of service was. Now, I don't know about you. I wouldn't have wanted Jesus anywhere near my feet. Anywhere near my feet. But I also don't really like confrontation, so I don't think I would have said anything. Like, I probably just would have sat there kind of awkward and been like, I don't really know what's going on. And we don't really see any of the disciples speaking up until we get to Peter. So we're going to skip down to verse 6, and we're going to see this interaction where Peter tries to reason with Jesus. So John 13:6, when Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you don't understand now what I am doing, but someday you will. No, Peter protested, you will never, ever wash my feet. Jesus replied, unless I wash you, you won't belong to me. Now, the text doesn't say this, but I kind of wonder if Peter feels like he's one-upping the other disciples a little bit here. Like, okay, guys, clearly you missed the point. Like, clearly you don't know who Jesus is. Don't worry. Like, I'll tell him, no, you can't wash my feet. He truly felt like the disciples were the ones who missed the point, so he had to speak up and say something. But I think verse 8 is one of the most important verses in this entire story because Jesus makes it so clear that Peter is the one who is missing the point. The NIV translates it this way. Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Jesus is telling Peter, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done with me, what you've done for me. You still need me to clean you. And now they're not talking about a physical cleansing, right? He's using this everyday task as a symbol to point to the work of forgiveness on the cross that will happen just a few short hours later. And here's what's even more crazy about this interaction is that it happened with Peter. Now, Peter was a part of Jesus's inner circle. So there were likely hundreds of people throughout Jesus's life who followed him at varying times and different degrees. But then he had 12 disciples, and these men were with him throughout his entire ministry. But within that group of 12, there was an even smaller group of 3 disciples who were close to Jesus, and Peter was one of these. Throughout the Gospels, we see Peter do some crazy things. He walked on water. He got to witness the transfiguration where he saw Jesus in his full glory of God. And Peter was the rock on which Jesus said he would build his church. Now, if there was a disciple who could say, I'm good, I've got this figured out, I know what this life with Jesus is going to look like, it would be Peter. But Jesus is crystal clear. It does not matter who Peter is, he still needs Jesus just like we still need Jesus. And there's lots of different reasons why I think this is hard for us to accept. I think over here we've got some of us who would say, you don't understand. You don't know my life. You don't know the things I've done. You don't know the thoughts I think. You don't know that thing that I keep going back to over and over again. There is no way that Jesus could ever cleanse my life completely clean. But then I think over here, there's some of us who, if we're really honest with ourselves, we say, I'm okay on my own. I don't really think I need Jesus. My life's doing okay by myself. But here's the thing. When we recognize we need our feet washed by Jesus, because we all do, it forces us to give up any ounce of control that we have and any illusion that we can repay Jesus for what he did for us. And this is uncomfortable, right? We like to be in control. We like to see the cause and effect of things. Like if I do this, then I know this will happen. But with grace, that all gets thrown out the window. There is nothing that we can do to earn grace and love from God. Because I can tell you, a perfect attendance record at church is not going to buy your way into heaven. Hours of service will not gain you any more love or favor from God than you already have right now. And living this way, living the way that Jesus showed us, it requires us to live our lives in this upside down, backward version of what the world tells us is justified. And it's uncomfortable. But Jesus tells Peter in this verse, you wanna be a part of me? You wanna be a part of what I'm doing? Allow me to wash you clean. Notice he doesn't say, you wanna be a part of me? Well, grab a pen and paper because I'm going to give you a laundry list of things that you need to do. Oh, you wanna be a part of me? Well, then you better shape up because your life's a mess and you need to get that figured out before you can come to me. He doesn't say any of that. All he says is, you want to be a part of me? Allow me to cleanse you. Because only when we can get to this place of fully embracing the love and the grace from Jesus that brings freedom, can we fully understand what it means to live the life of a servant with joy. Because if we still believe deep down that we can earn our way into heaven, why wouldn't we view going to church as an obligation? Why wouldn't we keep score of all the things that we did for God and be upset when things don't go our way? Why wouldn't we live the way the world tells us? We have to come to this place where we recognize that Jesus' love is all that we need. And this is what Jesus is showing to his disciples. Last week, Pastor Gareth challenged us to follow Jesus' example of humility. And he shared this story out of Mark chapter 10, where James and John come to Jesus and they ask him to elevate them above the other disciples, which is the way of the world, right? We want to get ahead. We want to be elevated higher than others. But Mark 10:43 says, among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else." But in this story, Jesus is living this out. He's not just telling his disciples, you need to live differently. He is actually showing us how he lived differently. In the very next verse in the story, Mark 10:45, he says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many." This is the heart of God. Not that he would come and experience all that life has to offer, not that he got what he deserved, not that he was justified in his life. The heart of God is that Jesus came as a ransom for many. And notice he said for many, not just his disciples, not just the people who are living a perfect life. Jesus came as a ransom for you, for me, for the person who cut you off in traffic earlier this week, for your next door neighbor, for the person who's maybe hard to love. Jesus came as a ransom for many. And this is the heart of God. But Jesus doesn't do anything without a purpose. So we are going to skip down to verse 12, and we are going to see Jesus makes it crystal clear to his disciples, I have invited you into this experience, not just for you to experience it, but because I want you to take this out into the world. So John 13:12, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again, sat down, and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you." Jesus makes it so clear to them. I have done this for you, so you will go out and do this for each other and do this for the world. And in this moment where Jesus recognizes that his hour is coming, that he is about to go to the cross, Jesus could have modeled anything for them, but he chooses to model servanthood. In the face where he knows that these men whose feet he is washing just hours later are going to desert him, betray him, deny that they ever knew him, he models the heart of a servant. And this makes me believe that this is a high priority of Jesus. But I wonder, are we living our lives with that same priority, no matter the circumstances? In this passage, we see that the way of Jesus is to serve and not be served. And we can accept this invitation to experience the heart of God by living in the purpose he created us for. Because our hearts start to look like Jesus when we turn our hearts towards others. God has created your heart with a divine purpose. Your gifts, your passions, your experiences, they are aligned perfectly so that you can take them and connect with somebody in a way that maybe no one else can. In 1 Corinthians 12, Paul writes to the church in Corinth, and he's reminding them that all gifts come from God. That there isn't a gift that is above another because they all come from the same perfect giver. And I think sometimes we believe this lie. We get stuck in this place of hesitancy or shame or guilt because we don't feel like we have the right gifts. We don't feel that we are good enough to make a difference. And if we stay in this place, we can miss out on opportunities that God might have for us because we're sitting in this place of feeling like we're not enough. But then on the flip side, I think sometimes we become so obsessed with figuring out our gifting, with becoming the best at whatever we're doing, that our lives become all about our gifts and less about the giver of those gifts. 1 Peter 4:10 tells us that God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. This is the reason that we have the gifts we have. Not so that people can look at us, not so that we can be the best at whatever it is we're doing. God gave us those gifts with one purpose, so that we could use them to serve others. So how do we do this? How do we take Jesus' command to follow his example, to put our gifts into practice, and to step into the purpose that God has for us? I've got 3 ways that I think that we can practically put this into action. We stay centered, we look up, and we step out. And I wanna take just a minute to break down these 3 action steps because I think there's something that each of us can take away and take into our week so that we can practically live out the way of Jesus. So first, we stay centered. First and foremost, our lives have to be centered around being in relationship with Jesus. John 15:4 reminds us that apart from Jesus, unless we remain in him, we cannot be fruitful. Serving will become striving if our priorities are out of alignment with Jesus. A life with Jesus is not one that is meant to be a list of shoulds, a list of things that we need to do. It is not meant to be a life of guilt or shame or burden. A life with Jesus gives us the freedom to step boldly into the purpose that God has for us and to live that out the way that he intended. But it's so easy to lose sight of that. This past October, I spent a week in Colorado with youth pastors from all over the country. And it was just meant to be a week for us to come together to encourage each other in ministry and a time for us to get away from distractions and spend time with Jesus. Now, this trip was a sacrifice for a few reasons. First, I don't really love being in nature, so don't know why I signed up for a trip called Wilderness, but here we are. But the second, if I can be really honest with you, as the trip got closer, I had this feeling of anxiety that just got more and more about all of the things that I wouldn't be able to accomplish that week. I had this long to-do list of things. It was pretty close to where we had just launched life groups. There was all these things that I knew I needed to get done, and those things would not get done while I was gone. And while I was there, it took 5 days of me having no cell reception, no to-do list, no computer, none of it, to realize how desperately my soul had to be recentered on Jesus. Because I was spending all this time working for him, and I was not spending enough time simply being with him. Now, you don't have to force yourself into 5 days without a cell phone. Maybe you do, I did. But you don't have to force yourself into 5 days without a cell phone to center your life on Jesus. This can be really small steps towards creating a life where you are in rhythm of relationship with Jesus. If you are currently someone who would say you don't spend any time in prayer, make a commitment to spend 5 minutes a day. Set a timer on your phone, your oven, whatever you need. Set a timer and just spend some time with Jesus. If you're someone who says, yeah, I read my Bible maybe once or twice a month, what could it look like for you to make a commitment to up that to once or twice a week? Because remember, when we are creating these rhythms of being in relationship with Jesus, the goal is not perfection. The goal is not a 100-day streak of reading your Bible, right? The goal is transformation. The goal is us getting to this place where spending time with Jesus is such a natural part of us. It's no longer an obligation that we just have to check off of our list. So next, we look up. Did you know that the average adult spends 3 to 4 hours per day looking on their phone? Notice I did not say teenager. Notice I did not say millennial. The average adult spends 3 to 4 hours per day looking on their phone. And what's our posture when we are looking at our phone? It's like this, right? We're looking down, our shoulders might be hunched, we're looking inward. And I think sometimes we get so focused on our phones, on our calendars, on our plans for the day that we spend so much time looking down, we miss out on the opportunity to be aware of who's around us, of conversations we could be intentionally having, of how we could be listening to people, not just hearing them, not just having surface level conversations. To allow God to speak to us and to give us opportunities to step into supporting others. Now, I've got a couple ideas of how you could do it. This first one is for me, okay? So maybe someone else will appreciate the challenge, but just so you know, this is for me. So I'm the type of person, I go to Starbucks, if you ask my husband, too many times a week, and I love the mobile order feature where I can just like put it on my phone and walk in and not make eye contact with anybody, grab my coffee and walk out, not have to speak to a single soul. Anyone else? No, just me? Okay, anyway. But what I've been doing is I've been trying to be intentional about actually going into the store and having a conversation with the person taking my order. It's a small thing, but for me, it's an intentional step that I can be making myself available to people around me. Or maybe if you are in the waiting room at an appointment, instead of just looking down, being on your phone, reading a magazine, whatever, just be looking up. Maybe spend that time praying for the people who are in the same waiting room as you. If you're not ready to go up and strike up a conversation with a complete stranger, that's okay. All this means is that you are making intentional choices to be available to the people around you. And once we do this, once we start looking up, listening, and asking God to make us aware of the people and brokenness around us, we can make the decision to do something about it. And that is when we step out. Serving usually requires sacrifice. It requires us to give up our time, our resources, maybe our pride, our comfort. Serving normally requires sacrifice. But I can tell you that that sacrifice is worth it. Not just for those warm, fuzzy feelings that we get because we're doing something good. It's worth it because that is us stepping into the purpose that God created us for. Jenny Allen says it this way: when we serve others, we see that there's a greater plan for our lives that's bigger than building a comfortable life. If the goal of our lives is simply to be comfortable, not only will we constantly be disappointed when things don't go our way, but we will be missing out on the opportunity for us to step in to the best that God has for us. And there's so many ways that you can step outside of yourself and serve, both within the church, within our local community, and globally as well. And here at ALC, we are working on some ways that we can come alongside of you as you identify what are your passions, what are your giftings, how has God created you and designed you to make a difference in this world. But if you are feeling a stirring in you of, I want to step out, I want to make a difference, I'm going to put a QR code, if I can speak, up on the screen. And if you would like to fill this out, someone from our team will reach out to you and just have a conversation. What are you passionate about? What are some things that you enjoy doing? And help you find a place where you can get plugged in and you can take this next step of stepping out and serving others. Well, as we head into our week, I want us to take a minute just to pause, to invite the Holy Spirit to come and to reveal to us what our next step might be. Maybe today, Jesus is inviting you to center your life with him. Maybe you're here and you have no idea what a life with Jesus really looks like. You have never taken that step. You've never really asked that question. Can I ask you, as Jenny said at our women's night a few weeks ago, to have 20 seconds of insane courage and to come up to one of our prayer partners or pastors after the service and simply ask that question: what does it mean to live a life with Jesus? We would love to pray with you and to just connect with you and to share our hearts of what a life with Jesus looks like. Or maybe you've been coming to church for a long time, but you've found yourself falling into that lie that you can earn your way into God's love, that your faith is only good through good works. Can I invite you to spend some time this week simply being with Jesus, simply sitting in his presence, experiencing his love, because there is nothing more exhausting than feeling like we are constantly trying to earn God's love and always coming up short. This life was not meant to be burdensome. A life with Jesus is one that is free from shame, that is free from guilt. And so maybe this week, just spend some time rereading our passage from this morning and accepting Jesus' invitation for him to cleanse you, to cleanse your life. Or maybe you've been looking down or staying still for too long. These past couple of years have made it really easy for us to make excuses, to stay isolated, and to only look out for ourselves. So maybe this week, spend some time asking God where you can be available to others, where you can step out. And then when those opportunities arise, ask for courage and boldness to step into the purpose that God has for you. Stay centered, look up, step out. The worship team is going to close us in one more song today. And as we worship together, can I just invite you to make this your prayer? This song is called Jesus at the Center. Make this your prayer that no matter what your next step is, that Jesus will truly be at the center of it. Because apart from his love, we truly can do nothing. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you for this morning, and I thank you for the truth that you are love. God, that you came to this earth not just for those of us who think we have life figured out, not just for those of us who are perfect, or who are getting it all right. God, you came to this earth for each and every one of us. God, I thank you that you have designed us to go out and to serve others, God, that you have put a divine and unique purpose inside each of us. And God, I just pray that this week, that will become clear to us. God, I pray that your presence would be tangible this week in a new way. God, I pray for this church family. I just pray that you will draw near to us and that you would show us how each and every day we can be living the way that Jesus did. In your name we pray, amen.